Hare Krishna. Hare Hare. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can turn that up slightly so I don't have to. Yeah. Hare Krishna, everyone, and good morning to you. Well, welcome to you all to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. I'm just filling in for Ramai Swami, so I don't know. Some of you may have come especially to listen to Maharaj. Okay. Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yasodhanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jayam Vishwapad Bharamhamsa Parivirajakatar Asatara Satais Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Govardhari Ki Jai Shri Shri Krishna Balaram Lord Giriraj Lord Nrsimhadev Ki Jai Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hare 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 Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, Hare Krishna. I'm struggling a little bit with my glasses. They broke this morning, but I think they're still going to work. So let's have a look here. Okay, here we go. Right, so we're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 14, entitled Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening, and we're up to text number 16. Okay, please repeat. Iti tam vira maricha kripanam bahubashinim pratyahanyunayan vacha pravridananga kashmalam iti tam vira maricha kripanam bahubashinim pratyahananayan vacha pravridananga kashmalam. Somebody like to chant? Iti tambira maricha kripanam bahubashinim pratyahananayan vacha pravridananga kashmalam. Iti tambira maricha kripanam bahubashinim pratyahananayan vacha pravridananga kashmalam. Any of our ladies want to have a go? Iti tambira maricha kripanam bahubashinim pratyananayan vacha pravridananga kashmalam. Iti tambira maricha kripanam bahubashinim pratyahananayan vacha pravridananga kashmalam. Okay, so here we go. Word for word translation. Oh, I just need a flat mat. Yeah, sorry. Just one of these. Sorry, just for my feet. Thank you. Okay, word for word translation. Iti, thus. Tam, unto her. Vira, O hero. Maricha, the son of Marichi Kashyapa. Kripanam, unto the poor. Bahubashinim, too talkative. Pratyaha, replied. Anunayan, pacifying. Vacha, by words. Pravridha, highly agitated. Ananga, lust. Kashmalam, contaminated. Right, translation. O hero Vidura, Diti, being thus afflicted by the contamination of lust, and therefore poor and talkative, was pacified by the son of Marichi in suitable words. Translation, please repeat. O hero Vidura, Diti, being thus afflicted by the contamination of lust, and therefore poor and talkative, was pacified by the son of Marichi in suitable words. Right, now we come to the purport. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. When a man or woman is afflicted by the lust of sex desire, it is to be understood as sinful contamination. Kashyapa was engaged in his spiritual activities, but he did not have sufficient strength to refuse his wife, who was thus afflicted. He could have refused her with strong words expressing impossibility, but he was not as spiritually strong as Vidura. Vidura is addressed here as a hero because no one is stronger in self-control than a devotee of the Lord. It appears that Kashyapa was already inclined to have sexual enjoyment with his wife, and because he was not a strong man, he tried to dissuade her only with pacifying words. Om Gyati Miranda Syaganandana Shalakira Chakrur Unmilitam Vinatasma Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master opened my darkened eyes with a torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Jai. Right, so let's have a look here what we've got. Hare Krishna. So, lust means attachment to one's own personal sense gratification or sense satisfaction. Right? And what is sense gratification? Well, basically it's indulgence. Right? Whatever the object of the indulgence may be, it is simply to really satisfy ourselves. That's pretty much it. Now, in our pastime today, right, we're discussing Kashyapa Muni and his wife Didi, and they are, of course, serving in very elevated positions. Right, they are progenitors of both demigods and the demons. Right, very powerful personalities within this material universe. But nevertheless, they are still materially embodied, right? And any living being who is materially embodied, they do maintain some material desires, right, to some extent, either great or small. And in today's purport, right, so Srila Prabhupada, he is clearly stating that Diti's affliction for sex was because of lust, right? We're also reading in this chapter, you know, Diti actually, she desired to conceive sons. And that is, of course, very proper for a wife to have that desire to produce sons for her husband, for herself, we could say, but certainly to create a family and also to please the forefathers and the relatives and so forth. These are duties for a wife. But in this particular case, we're discussing sinful contamination, right? So what is contamination? Contamination is when the pure, the originally pure consciousness of the spiritual living being becomes polluted by something that is, how could we say it? Something that denotes our desires to enjoy separately from Krishna. Right? It's essentially, it's actually a selfish motivation on behalf of the living being. Srila Prabhupada discusses he writes in a letter here to Sadbhuj, one of his disciples, Prabhupada, you know, because Sadbhuj Prabhu was asking Srila Prabhupada, you know, if the spiritual soul is totally unaffected by matter, which we read about in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, how is it then that we come into this polluted state of existence? And Prabhupada writes very clearly, right, well, you're right, the spiritual soul, right, it is unaffected by anything, it cannot be withered, it cannot be dried, all these descriptions that are there in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. But Prabhupada says the consciousness of the spiritual jiva can become polluted. Right, so that's how it happens. So, and Prabhupada often he will describe consciousness as being the symptom of the spiritual soul. So, everything living that we know, yes, it possesses consciousness. Everything from, everyone, from the demigods down to the tiny bacteria, right? Even a little germ, a little bacteria, which we can't even see with our own eyes. Yes, that living being also has consciousness. So, by studying these texts, such as Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, we learn that sin, this means that we are doing something that is going against God's laws, right? In other words, it is sin is something that somehow does not fall in with what Krishna considers appropriate, or shall we say recommended, for the smooth running of society, right, in general. But some people they like to debate like this, and they say, well, what's wrong with just satisfying ourselves? Everyone has desires after all. We can just all live happily, and we can all just go about our own pleasures. So why can't we just do that? Right. Well, so whenever we have more than one living being, that means we have a society. There has to be some sort of regulations and some sort of rules and behavioral guidelines, so that one person's activities are not going to infringe on another person's activities. And of course, it's not always so easy to do, because yes, we all do have desires. All jivas have desires. It's part of being alive, that we all have some sort of desires. But ultimately, only Krishna knows how all living beings can live together in perfect harmony, right? And therefore, he is establishing certain guidelines and religious principles, so that all his parts and parcels can live harmoniously and with each other. Actually, it is said that ultimately there is only one society. Actually, like in today we have so many countries and so many nations and so many political systems and so forth. But actually, in reality, there is only one society, and that is Krishna's society. And it includes all of the living beings. And actually, it is the duty of every living being to fall in with Krishna's laws, shall we say. So basically, we should understand that acting outside of religious principles and religious guidelines, that means basically that we are acting or behaving for selfish purposes, because we're not really considering the desires of the Supreme Lord, and we're not really considering how our actions are going to impact on other individuals. So, Krishna provides for everyone's needs, but he may not necessarily provide for everyone's wants. This is up to Krishna's discretion. So yesterday Mahatma Prabhu was discussing in class how we should expect Krishna's mercy, but that mercy, that means basically. Krishna knows the needs of the spiritual living beings. And I was reading today also, Prabhupada says that when a husband and wife marry, they should gather for themselves the bare necessities to maintain their household life. Bare necessities, very, very minimal. Outside of that, then we're getting into wants rather than needs. Right? But primarily, Krishna is concerned for our spiritual welfare, as are all of our acharyas, all the elevated personalities. So, excuse me 1 second. So now, in our pastime today, right, in the case of Diti, the wife of Kashyapa Muni, okay, so we're hearing how her desires are based on lust, and I want to read, okay, let's have a look here. Right, we have this Bhagavad Gita shloka. Right, so this is a very famous kind of shloka here, 337. I think I've got the right one, 337. Yeah, that's it. Kama Shokrada Esha Rajaguna Samud Bhavaha Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyanam Ihavairinam. This is one of our sort of key shlokas, and you've got the translation there. Would somebody like to read it? Thank you very much. So, in that translation, yes, the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. There's pretty strong words there. And normally I don't teach so much from Bhagavad Gita during a Srimad Bhagavatam class, but I want to read a little bit more from the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. We have, for example, text 60. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. And then we have 61. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. And here, number 62, while contemplating the object of... Oh, that's the one we just did? No? This is another one. While contemplating the object of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment, lust develops, and from lust, anger arises. So, it's this message again and again, coming into contact with the material energy. I want to flip back to now text 59 in the second chapter. Krishna says, the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains, but seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So, this being fixed in higher taste, how else can we really overcome the demands of the senses in the material world, right? As I was saying earlier, we cannot stop desiring. Desires are always going to be there. It is a part of being alive. We have desires, and actually, it's the Buddhists. The Buddhists attempt to do this. They try to negate the senses. Yeah, what is it? Something that they say, like, just to totally do away with desire, totally, kind of pretend, I suppose we could say in one sense, that desires are not there, and consequently, they end up in this kind of voidism and impersonalism. Right? We have this is in Srila Prabhupada's prayer. And this is a kind of a suicide for the soul. And, the Buddhists are thinking that this is all very wonderful and that they're going to end up in nirvana. So nirvana means no variegatedness. It means no natural propensities on behalf of the living being. But yes, the spiritual soul will always have some desires. So the idea is to develop a higher taste, right? To dovetail our desires, right? Not to try and pretend that they don't exist, or to try and destroy them, in some sort of way. Now, let's have a look here what more we've got. So the contact with the material quality of passion, right? It is actually, right, so we've got passion there, the mode of passion. This is actually a great misfortune for the spiritual soul to come into contact with the material mode of passion, because once that connection is made, it's actually very, very difficult to control. In the mode of goodness, right, the mode of goodness is said to be compatible with devotional life, right? There are so many nice characteristics in the mode of passion, in the mode of goodness, that will help the living being along in their devotional practices, and thereby make better decisions for himself and also for others. In the mode of goodness, the living being can see more clearly, right? See more clearly who he himself is. He can see more clearly who other living beings are. He can see more clearly what the relationships are between the living beings and the Supreme Lord. But in the mode of passion, right, there's a few descriptors. The mode of passion is said to distort the intelligence. Distort the intelligence. And another descriptor is that the intelligence becomes perplexed. Can you get that back, please? I've got a little cough, Lolly. Yeah, so the intelligence is really disadvantaged when the living being comes into contact with the mode of passion. Thank you very much. Yeah. And consequently, excuse me, the living being is unable to prioritize matters properly. And we can see in today's pastime, Diti, right, because her consciousness had come into contact with Rajagum, mode of passion, she chose to satisfy her own individual personal desires rather than adhere to the recommendations that are there in Shastra and that were given by her good husband, namely being that in the evening is not a good time to conceive a child, and the consequences of that was that she conceived these two extremely evil and wicked sons who ended up causing problems for the whole universe, more or less. So we want to be careful, right, with the modes of material nature. There are consequences that are described for each of the modes, right? So consequences of Rajagun, mode of passion, are misery, stress, anxiety, uncontrollable desire, right? Who wants that? No, nobody wants that. Consequences of Tamagun are madness, foolishness, and hopelessness. This is very clearly written in the Bhagavad Gita, and it actually surprises me. Whoops, there goes my glasses. It actually surprises me that even today, sadly, even today, sadly, we do see that even some devotees, who know this philosophy, it's there, it's written in the Bhagavad Gita, it's written in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that if an individual undertakes actions in the lower modes of material nature, there are very specific consequences, and these are what they are. So we really need to take Krishna's words seriously here. The consequences of the mode of goodness are greater knowledge, peacefulness, happiness, and starting to gain an interest in spiritual life. This is the consequence of acting in the mode of goodness. So, okay, so I think I'll jump forward here. Now, I want to discuss another topic that comes up in Srila Prabhupada's purport today. It's actually the topic of Vidura, Vidura Mahatma. So Prabhupada is saying that Mahatma Vidura, he was spiritually strong because he was a devotee of the Lord. Right? And this is actually quite interesting, you know, because since time immemorial, and even in today's world, we know that there are so many different types of yogis and mystic practitioners, and you know, people who get into all sorts of behaviors that are discussed in the Vedas, that are discussed in Shastras, but they will not take to the path of Vaishnavism, right? So this is actually, you know, people who are into, for example, the dark arts, you know, and such people are usually under the illusion that all these types of odd mystic and dark arts, and even just yoga outside of bhakti yoga, they are under the impression that these sorts of systems of yoga are the most or are going to deliver the most effective sort of personal strength for the practitioner, right? In other words, you know, that they are going to be very, very powerful, or that they're going to be very influential by taking to these sorts of practices. But this is all actually a fallacy, right? Because, you know, Krishna says, again in Bhagavad Gita, he says that everything rests on him, just like pearls are strung on a thread, right? The individual jiva, where do we get our strength from? We get it from Krishna. We can't get it from anywhere else. You know, so these, you know, and the Vaishnava knows this. They understand this. So they, you know, they are not seeking any sort of personal strength or even abilities for themselves outside of their relationship with the Supreme Lord. Right? They are just totally dependent on the Lord and surrendered to Him, because this is where ability, Krishna is where ability comes from, and also Krishna is where strength comes from. Right? So this is why, you know, we have Srila Prabhupada making this statement in his purport that Mahatma Vidura was spiritually strong because he was a devotee of the Lord. Right? So I want to speak a little bit about Vidura, and here we have some. This is these images here are from the Mahabharata rendition, the very extended one produced by Chopra. It's very, very good. It's very accurate. So if any of you don't know Vidura, right? So Vidura, so we're going back 5,000 years ago to the time when our dear Krishna was on earth last time in his original form. So Vidura was the younger brother of king of Dhritarashtra and Pandu, who were born into the Kuru dynasty. Now, Dhritarashtra, as the eldest brother, he had been born blind. So originally it was thought, well, he can't sort of take the throne. He can't inherit the kingdom. So the throne was given to Pandu, but then Pandu died quite young. So again, the crown was handed back to Dhritarashtra. Now, Dhritarashtra, in addition to being physically blind, it was also said that he had what we can say called blind ambitions, right? He was very ambitious that his own son, Duryodhana, should inherit the throne after him, even though it was also well known that Duryodhana was very, very wicked, very evil, scheming, cunning sort of personality. Vidura, as the younger brother, he was not able to sit on the throne because he had been born, his mother was a Sudra, right? She was not a Brahmana. And so Vidura ended up taking the role of the prime minister, right, for his own eldest brother. And he served he was a very dedicated servant in that role, you know, always trying to guide his eldest brother onto the path of morality and religion. But because of Dhritarashtra's ambitions, it was, it was actually very difficult for Vidura to do this, right? Because Dhritarashtra wasn't actually doing the right thing by the throne of Hastinapur. That's why we ended up getting, you know, all these atrocities, like when there was the attempt to disrobe Draupadi, right, in the assembly in the palace of Hastinapur, and you know, lots of other schemes against the Pandavas carried out, and eventually we know that all of this led to the Battle of Kurukshetra. But Vidura, he was always regarded as very wise, right? He would always speak the truth, right? They said that he spoke bitter truths, regardless of what was happening and regardless of whether anyone wanted to hear it. Vidura was always speaking like this, and the reason, of course, like his wisdom and his sharp intellect was actually because he is none other than Lord Yamaraj. Lord Yamaraj is known as the god of death. He is the one who decides the destiny of souls in the material world. So I'll just explain a little bit about how all this came about, that Lord Yamaraj took birth as Vidura. So once upon a time in Bharat, the state police, they caught some thieves, right? Some thieves were hiding in a hermitage of a sage called Manduka Muni. And then these police, so they arrested the thieves, but they also arrested the Muni, Manduka Muni, right, for hiding the thieves, right? And the magistrate, he was about to punish the sage by piercing him with a lance, you know, sort of a sharp object. He was going to punish the Muni in that way. But then the king heard about it and he stopped it and everything and apologized. But nevertheless, the sage then traveled to Yamaraj to ask him, you know, why was I given this horrible sentence, you know, to be pierced by a lance? And Lord Yamaraj replied, well, when you were a boy, it may have been in a previous life, I think, you had pierced a little ant with a straw. And for that reason, you know, that was why, you know, you were about to be pierced by a lance. Now, Manduka Muni said, well, this is outrageous. You know, how can you, he was saying this to Lord Yamaraj, how can you give such a cruel punishment, you know, for a child doing, you know, such a small act? And so, you know, thereby the sage actually cursed Yamaraj, you know, that, okay, and, you know, saying, well, this was really sort of ignorant, you know, that I should be punished in this way, so therefore I curse you to become a Sudra, right? So that was his curse to Lord Yamaraj. And then Lord Yamaraj, so he was, you know, because he'd been cursed, he was forced to take a birth as a Sudra, and that birth was Vidura. So, you know, as the personality of Vidura, he still had that sharp focus and intelligence and self-awareness, but his father was a Brahmana, but his mother was a Sudra. So, and then of course, you know, Vidura, as I was saying, he was acting as the prime minister of his eldest brother Dhritarashtra, trying to guide him on the path of religion and morality. But eventually both Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana ended up offending Vidura, you know, especially Duryodhana, to the point where Vidura just left. You know, he left. I think that would have been just before the Battle of Kurukshetra. Yeah, just before the Battle of Kurukshetra, and then he went to the Himalayas, and then he met Maitreya Muni, and that's where we are now in our Srimad Bhagavatam. We're hearing the discourse between Maitreya Muni and Vidura. Right. So, you know, and just one other nice little pastime here about Vidura. You know, whilst just again leading up to the Battle of Kurukshetra, we had Krishna himself traveling to Hastinapur as a messenger of peace, right, to try and prevent war, inevitable war, we could say. And when he arrived there, Duryodhana tried to flatter him and, sort of say, oh, come to my palace, you can come and eat there, trying to win the favor of Krishna. But Krishna spoke out, quite bluntly and said, no, I'm not going to eat at your palace, Duryodhana. I'm going to go and eat with my friend Vidura, right? Because Vidura was actually a devotee of the Lord. He was very dear to the Lord. And, Krishna was also very dear to Vidura. They had a very, very nice friendship. So Vidura went to eat at the smaller residence of Vidura, even though it is said that the food there was certainly a lot more simple food than what he would have got at Duryodhana's grand palace. But nevertheless, Krishna chose to eat there because Vidura was his friend. So this is actually something we can think about when it comes to prasadam. That prasadam, when it is prepared with love, and in the right consciousness, this is what we. This is really, what we should be trying to prepare ourselves and also to consume. It's very important, actually. So now, what else have I got here? Well, I'm just going to finish. Actually, I've already discussed this point here. Just this in Prabhupada's purport, right? Srila Prabhupada is commenting that Vidura was addressed as a hero because he had this self-control of a true devotee of the Lord. And I think in this particular case, Prabhupada is specifically referring to the self-discipline that comes with controlling the false ego. If we can look at a personality that is diametrically opposed, like let's look at Duryodhana. Like, so Duryodhana was described as ahankari, like somebody who is really the representation of the false ego, who is wanting to gain everything for themselves and who has no sense of restraint. Right? So. As I was discussing earlier, when we act outside of Krishna's laws and recommendations, then it should be understood that we are acting from the platform of selfishness. Whatever that behavior may be. So today we've been discussing ditthi, being afflicted with lusty desires. Right, but it can be, any behavior. Actually, selfishness runs all the way through Raja and Tamaguns, right, the lower material modes. It's like an invisible thread. I think I've mentioned this before. So, to really come away from that and to rise above that and come into the mode of goodness and eventually pure goodness, that's when we let go of selfish desires. And we really start thinking about, well, what are Krishna's desires? What is going to work best for others? And in that way, we can start to purify our consciousness, raise our consciousness, and eventually become situated in bhakti. And once we're nicely situated in bhakti, then we can progress towards real Krishna consciousness. So I'm going to leave it on this today. We're going to be hearing more. We're really only, where are we? Verse 16. There's many more verses in this chapter, and most of them actually do discuss ditthi. Dithi's strong desires to indulge, but also she wanted to have sons. So I suppose it was both. So, you're going to be hearing more about this for the rest of this chapter. Okay, does anyone have any question about what I've been discussing or a comment? Anything they'd like to add? Yes, Buddha. Yeah. Speak straight into the microphone.
The situation that we live in, a society that doesn't value society. I mean, it came out in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher Ronald Reagan, saying how there is no society. It's only a group of people interacting for their needs, their desires. So a very selfish attitude to be had in the world, and yet we value community, as to say, as in Vedic culture. I was saying this yesterday to a guest, how in Vedic culture the women are considered the opulence of the society because of their purity. So we're talking about valuing the higher quality, and other than for academic, we are actually born into this situation where it is by nature's arrangement that people go through these natural changes in that
You mean the four varnas and ashrams, or?
No, I'm thinking in terms of with just growth, that people are going through stages of family life. In that, as you're saying, it's considered a responsibility of the women to bear children in the family, and the importance of that. Actually, again, valuing community, where you're saying prioritize, and it is a need, as I say, thinking, other than for academics, they're thinking, well, okay, how much do we involve ourselves in this? But the real crux of it is, how do we transform that lust into love? Because that actually that is the opposite, isn't it? It is love.
Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. So that's the point with your question, is the last, what you say. How do we transform that lust into love?
Elaborate on that.
So this is actually what our Krishna consciousness movement is about. That we are changing our material desires into spiritual desires. Right? It is said, if I can switch just momentarily to the pastimes, to Krishna's own pastimes with the gopis, it is said that the gopis were also lusty. They were described as lusty, but their lust was to satisfy Krishna. Their lust was not to satisfy themselves. Right? So there is a huge difference. Right? So, whatever desire, whatever sorts of desires we have, this is actually what Srila Prabhupada came to teach us, that there is a process by which we can engage our minds and our senses, so that little by little they become purified, right? And when the senses and the mind and when the intellect becomes purified, gradually, we will actually lose an interest in satisfying ourselves, and we will gain more and more interest in, asking, for example, what would Srila Prabhupada want us to do in this particular situation? What would the Acharyas want us to do in this particular situation? What does the Supreme Lord himself want us to do in this situation? So that becomes a reality for the Vaishnava, for the practitioner of bhakti, that they gradually lose interest. It just becomes very paltry after a while, interest in their in satisfying themselves, and they are really more thinking about bigger considerations, spiritual considerations. Yeah.
So that would just take us to submitting to the...
surrender is one part of the process, surrendering. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Anyone else have a question? If anyone doesn't have a question about what I've discussed today, you may have a question about on another topic, anything from our Shastras or anything in Krishna consciousness. Yes, would you like to pass her the microphone, please?
Thank you for the class. And my understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that lust is for sexual desires is the highest in our mind as not souls, but in our body, but not just lust. Any desires could be for lust for fame, lust for money, and this is maybe subtle, than the sexual desire. So that's why the sexual desire is listed in Srimad Bhagavatam and in Bhagavad Gita, like for everyone, but the others are not for everyone. And as an example, I can say for myself that I don't have a desire for sex, but I can have other desires for fame, for money, for other self-satisfaction.
Yeah.
Is it correct, or it just sexual desire is the one we need to purify from,
No.
and the rest are all right?
Well, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your question. Now, I think I've understood it. I'm going to answer. Okay. Look at some personalities such as the four Kumaras. You've heard of the four Kumaras, right? So the four Kumaras, they are Manas Putra. They are the mind-born sons of Lord Brahma, right? Now, when they appeared, they were already quite advanced souls, right? And because even as very young boys, they did not want to enter into adulthood because they wanted to be able to focus on spiritual matters. Therefore, they chose to keep their bodies as young 5-year-olds. In other words, no sexual maturity, right? Oh, my throat. I'm so sorry. Just 1 second. So, I don't think it's correct to say that everyone is at every stage of their lives afflicted with sexual desire, right? If that is what you are intending, that sexual desire is always there, is that what you were suggesting? That sexual desire is always present in some capacity? Is that what you were?
Most.
Most.
Mostly.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, I think the four Kumaras are a good example, because what you're talking about, they specifically took a particular course of action to offset that, that they did not want to be disturbed sexually. And they have been successful, we could say, in that, from what we understand. So they have remained at that age where there is no sexual agitation, in the body. We can also say, I think it's also correct to say, that once an individual does reach adulthood, right, we can just look around in the world and we see that so many of these other desires that you listed, such as, desiring a good career, desiring a lot of money, desiring this and that, they do seem to somehow or other be connected to an individual's desires for sexual gratification. They do become implicated, that they become entangled in that whole mesh. Yeah, and it's actually very, very difficult to undo all that, to unpack all that. But, as I was saying, and as we were reading, through gaining a higher taste for something higher, so that thing which is above the material senses and the material body and the material mind, by reaching that higher taste, we can actually transcend it. And transcending it is a lot easier than trying to actually unpack it on the material platform, because I don't know, I'm 60 years old now, and sometimes I look back and I look at some of the material entanglements that have occurred, that I have actually experienced in my own life or witnessed in other people. And there are so many entanglements, like different factors within the material realm become so ensnared that in the end you can't even see what's what. You've probably all experienced this, you know, that some problems that we encounter in the material world, if you try and trace their source, or if you try and pick it apart, it's just like, oh, no, it's just a mess, you know. And so, you know, actually, yes, it is true that just simply, you know, in one sense, you know, not becoming so disturbed by the material entanglements and simply trying to transcend it all. This is actually the recommended path. It is an easier path. It is certainly the wiser path. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to ask if this, Mataji, did you want to say something else in response? Because I'm trying to answer your question.
Yes, I understood that when we we are talking about the desires, we can eliminate desires. I have desire for sex, it's gone. Then I have, what other desires I have? I have desire for money, and I need to overcome it as well. It's gone. And then other desires will come up, and we need to get rid of them as well.
We do.
Okay.
And the process is not actually so different, you know, because as I was just saying, like all of those material desires that are kind of connected and, you know, in some way, the solution is still the same, you know, and this is, the solution is this process that Srila Prabhupada has brought us, because, you know, the whole package that Prabhupada has given us, you know, our sadhana and service and sadhusanga and everything, it acts on all levels. You know, we're extremely fortunate to have it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. Yeah, thank you. Did anyone else, just a minute, Buddha, did anyone else want to ask any question? No. Okay, Buddha, I can take one more quick question of you.
Spoken on really, and that is, I just wanted to mention a connection, as in with the sloka it was mentioning sinful activity.
Sinful contamination.
So actually, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur he was asked, well, what is sin? And he said sin was ignorance, right? So actually, all ignorance is seeing something separate to Krishna. So if we have that desire to have that fame, be famous as somebody preaching Krishna consciousness, if we have some desire to have that money, spend that money on Krishna, so actually all of these things can be transformed again back into that loving service as well. So
we sometimes we use the word dovetail in ISKCON, you know, this word dovetail, that, you know, whatever material, or shall we say whatever worldly activities we are involved with, we somehow try and dovetail them or bring them in onto, you know, onto our own or into our own, shall we say, activities, you know, as devotees, and thereby those activities become purified, and perhaps our attachment to those activities can also become purified. Yeah. Thank you very much. I might leave it at that. Yeah. Okay, Jai. Thank you everyone for coming. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna.